Have you ever felt invisible, like no one even noticed you existed? What if one day you had the power to turn the tables on those who underestimated you? What would you do if you discovered that the people who looked down on you actually worked for you all along? Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Story Precious so you never miss an inspiring tale like this. Your support helps us bring you more powerful and meaningful stories. Now, let's begin. I'll never forget the day I walked into Summit Enterprises with my mop and bucket, just another morning in my navy blue uniform. My name's Emma Carter, 49 years old, a mother of two, and for 15 years, I was the cleaning lady nobody noticed. Outside of work, I lived a quiet life in a modest Chicago apartment, juggling bills, making sure my kids had what they needed, and dreaming of a better future. But at Summit Enterprises, I was just another uniformed worker blending into the background. The office bustled with energy, but I was just another shadow in the background. Executives in their crisp suits breezed past me, their shoes clicking on the polished floors, treating me like I was part of the furniture. Until the day I wasn't. It all started with a spilled coffee and a cruel laugh. The CEO, Richard Lane, smirked as he pointed at me. "Clean it up, Grandma," he barked. His voice was dripping with arrogance, his cronies chuckling along as though my dignity was a punchline. I paused, my hands tightening around my mop, my face burning with humiliation. I wanted to say something, but years of being overlooked had trained me to keep my head down. I had been through this before so many times. The whispered jokes, the patronizing smirks, the way people barely acknowledged my existence unless they needed something cleaned up. I remember the time an executive knocked over a stack of files and simply walked away, expecting me to pick them up like I was invisible. The sting of humiliation was familiar, but that day, standing in the middle of the lobby with coffee seeping into the marble floor, something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to swallow this one. Not anymore. That day, however, something shifted inside me. I made a promise to myself. He'd regret that. As I wiped up the mess, I looked around. The receptionist avoided my gaze, and in turn shuffled uncomfortably, and even the janitor on the night shift gave me a sympathetic nod. Everyone saw it, but no one spoke up. It wasn't the first time, and it wouldn't be the last, unless I did something about it. That night, as I pushed my cart down the silent hallways, I took a longer pause outside Richard's office. I'd spent years cleaning up after these people, but I had also spent years watching. I had seen executives padding expense accounts with company money, managers turning a blind eye to harassment complaints, and employees who were loyal for decades discarded like yesterday's trash. One night, I even found a shredded memo detailing layoffs that were strategically hidden from investors. It was clear this place thrived on deception, and they thought no one was paying attention. But I was. I had seen who they really were when no one was looking. And most importantly, I knew something they didn't, that their reign of power was about to change. What Richard and the rest of them didn't realize was that I wasn't just a cleaning lady. 15 years ago, my uncle, a major investor, left me a hidden ace, majority shares in Summit Enterprises. Instead of selling out, I chose to stay, watching, waiting. I saw good, hardworking people getting laid off while Richard bragged about his record profits and luxurious lifestyle. I witnessed secret meetings where he and his top executives plotted ways to cut corners, knowing full well it would hurt the workers who made their success possible. I listened as they laughed about slashing benefits, as if the people who scrubbed their floors and made their coffee didn't matter. I had enough. That night, I called my old friend and lawyer, Tom. "It's time," I said, my voice firm. Over the years, I had quietly gathered proof, photos of shredded documents, emails detailing illegal terminations, financial reports that didn't add up. I had even overheard Richard on a call, boasting about shifting company funds to a private account. I had the evidence, and I had waited for the perfect moment to strike. Tom grinned, eyes sharp with excitement. At the shareholders' meeting, we'll bring him down. We met at a small diner later that night, away from prying eyes. I laid out everything, printouts, handwritten notes, and voice recordings from my late night shifts. Tom's eyebrows lifted as he flipped through the papers. "Emma, This isn't just unethical, it's criminal. I nodded. I don't just want him out. I want justice for everyone he stepped on. Tom leaned forward, voice low. Then we go all in. We make sure the board, the press, and the regulators see this. No loopholes, no escape. My hands trembled slightly, but not with fear, with anticipation. I had played the silent observer long enough. Tomorrow, the world would see who Richard Lane truly was. A week later, I walked into the boardroom, still in my uniform, mop in hand. The moment I stepped in, the conversation halted and all eyes turned to me. Richard, once the golden boy of the corporate world, had built his reputation on aggressive takeovers and ruthless business tactics. He was a Wall Street darling, admired for his ability to squeeze profits at any cost. Now, reclining smugly at the head of the table, he glanced up and scoffed, as if my presence was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "What's she doing here?" he sneered, waving a dismissive hand as if I were a nuisance. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I own this company, Richard." Laughter rippled through the room, some nervous, some mocking. I didn't flinch. I walked forward, placed my mop against the wall, and pulled out my folder, slamming it on the conference table. "These," I said, my voice clear and unwavering, "are the falsified reports, the illegal layoffs, the stolen money. The evidence is undeniable." Silence. The board members leaned forward, their curiosity quickly turning to concern as they skimmed through the documents. A few gasped. Others whispered hurriedly among themselves. I spotted one executive gripping the table's edge, his face draining of color. They knew the implications. Tom, standing beside me, spoke next. "Emma holds the majority shares, and she has the votes to remove Richard Lane as CEO, effective immediately." Richard's face twisted in rage, his nostrils flaring. "You can't do this," he spat, standing so abruptly that his chair nearly toppled over. "Oh, but I can," I said calmly. "And I am." I paused, locking eyes with him. "You're fired, Richard." The room erupted into a storm of reactions. One board member, clearly rattled, fumbled with his pen before blurting out, "This is absurd. Richard has led this company for years." But his words lacked conviction, and no one echoed his defense. Another, a woman who had been quietly flipping through the documents, leaned back at her chair and exhaled. "These numbers don't lie. We should have seen this coming." A few exchanged nervous glances, while one executive, who had once been one of Richard's closest allies, suddenly distanced himself. "I had no idea about any of this," he claimed, his voice tight. Meanwhile, Richard stood frozen, his face twisting between rage and panic, watching as the people who had once backed him now recoiled in self-preservation. Some board members nodded, others murmured amongst themselves. Richard's expression contorted between fury and disbelief as he looked from face to face, searching for an ally. None of them spoke up for him. His jaw tightened. "This isn't over," he growled before shoving his chair aside and storming toward the door. His expensive shoes pounded against the polished floors, each step echoing with defeat. For the first time in 15 years, I wasn't invisible. I looked around the table, seeing something different in the eyes of the employees who remained: recognition, respect. The janitors, assistants, and staff who had been overlooked for so long, they finally had someone who saw them, someone who had fought for them. And this was just the beginning. That evening, headlines exploded. CEO ousted in shareholder power move. News outlets covered every detail, dissecting the power shift and the corruption that had led to Richard's downfall. Regulators wasted no time. His assets were frozen, lawsuits followed, and his name was dragged through every financial publication. Overnight, his empire crumbled, and justice had come knocking faster than even I had expected. The next day, I walked into Summit, not in a uniform, but in jeans and a sweater. For the first time in 15 years, I didn't feel small. I wasn't an invisible worker anymore. The cleaning crew, my old colleagues, gathered in the lobby, beaming. "You did it, Emma," one of them said, handing me a coffee. There was warmth in their eyes, a gratitude that went beyond words. I had fought not just for myself, but for them too. Later, I stepped into Richard's old office. The mahogany desk, the leather chair was all his, but it no longer belonged to him. I didn't care for the power or the luxury, but I cared about the people. The first thing I did? Raise wages for the cleaning crew, reinstate employees who had been unfairly laid off, and put an end to the mass terminations for profit. The company had bled enough at the hands of the greedy. Now it was time for change. On my desk, I placed a simple suggestion box. The first note? More coffee. I chuckled and made it happen. But beyond that, the suggestions kept coming, requests for fairer schedules, better benefits, transparency for management. And I listened. Every single one of them. A few days later, Miguel, one of the janitors I had worked with for years, stopped me in the hallway. His voice was quiet, but his eyes held something powerful. "My daughter saw you on TV," he said. "She said she wants to be like you someday." I blinked back the sudden sting of emotion. "Tell her to be even better," I said, gripping his shoulder. In that moment, I realized this was bigger than just me. I had become something I never imagined, a symbol of hope for the people who had always been overlooked. Summit Enterprises was no longer just a corporation. One afternoon, as I walked through the office, a woman from accounting stopped me. "Emma," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "for the first time in years, I don't feel like a number here. My husband's medical bills were piling up, and I was terrified of losing my job. But now, I finally have security." She gripped my hand, eyes shining with gratitude. That moment solidified what I had been working toward. We introduced employee wellness programs, fair wages, and diversity initiatives to ensure everyone had a voice. The rigid, top-down structure that once defined Summit was gone, replaced by a culture of collaboration and respect. For the first time, employees weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They were seen, heard, and valued. It was transforming into a company that valued its people. We introduced employee wellness programs, fair wages, and diversity initiatives to ensure everyone had a voice. The rigid, top-down structure that once defined Summit was gone, replaced by a culture of collaboration and respect. For the first time, employees weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They were seen, heard, and valued. Richard tried to fight back, but karma had other plans. First, he filed a lawsuit, claiming I had somehow manipulated my way into controlling the company. We shut him down fast. The court ruled in our favor almost immediately, calling his case frivolous. Then, as if the universe wanted to have the final word, a month later, a leaked video of Richard throwing a tantrum after getting fired surfaced online. In the clip, he was seen trashing his office, knocking over chairs, and screaming at security as they escorted him out. The internet had a field day with it. Memes spread like wildfire. #RichardRage trended on Twitter, and late-night talk shows like The Tonight Show and The Daily Show roasted his meltdown. One particularly viral meme compared him to a toddler throwing a tantrum in a grocery store, complete with a side-by-side image of a screaming child. Even celebrities chimed in. One A-list comedian tweeted, "Richard Lane just showed us what happens when a CEO doesn't get his golden parachute. Somebody get this man a juice box." The humiliation was relentless, and it didn't take long for his downfall to become the internet's favorite joke. Clips of his outburst flooded TikTok, with creators adding dramatic voiceovers and mock reactions. It wasn't long before he became the laughingstock of corporate America. His last allies abandoned him. No investors would touch him. No companies would hire him. He had burned too many bridges, and now he was stranded. Reports emerged that he had been forced to liquidate his assets just to pay legal fees. His once prized yacht? Seized. His mansion? Sold at auction. His name, once respected in the business world, had become a cautionary tale of arrogance and greed. Meanwhile, Summit Enterprises was thriving. A year after his departure, the difference was like night and day. The toxic culture was gone. Employees no longer feared mass layoffs. Smiles replaced tension in the hallways. People had a say in decisions that affected them. The cleaning staff, my old colleagues, now had fair wages and better working conditions. I even made sure to frame that first suggestion note about coffee and place it on my desk as a reminder of why I was here. As for Richard, last I heard, he was selling condos in a nowhere town, trying to salvage what was left of his name. Forgotten, broke, and powerless. I never set out to be a hero. I was just a cleaning lady who had decided enough was enough. And if I could do this, so can you. Lessons learned from the story. This story teaches us that patience, perseverance, and quiet observation can be powerful tools for change. Emma spent years being overlooked, but she never let her circumstances define her. Instead, she gathered knowledge, waited for the right moment, and used her intelligence and resilience to take control. The lesson here is clear. Never underestimate the power of someone who has been silently watching and waiting. Meaningful message. At its core, this story is about justice, dignity, and standing up for what is right. It reminds us that no matter how invisible we may feel, we always have the ability to make a difference. Fairness, respect, and integrity should be at the heart of every workplace. When leaders prioritize greed over people, they eventually fall. And when everyday workers stand together, real change happens. Personal perspective on the story. Emma's journey resonates deeply because it reflects the struggles of so many hardworking people. It's easy to feel powerless in the face of corporate corruption, but her story shows that even those at the bottom of the ladder can rise to the top with determination and strategy. The moment she fired Richard wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming respect for herself and everyone who had been mistreated. This is a powerful reminder that strength isn't just about wealth or status. It's about courage and conviction. If this story inspired you, don't forget to follow and subscribe to Story Precious for more powerful stories that will move, motivate, and challenge your perspective. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Join our growing community, and let's keep sharing stories that matter.